And let me go ahead and share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right, and just let me know if you can see my slides. Cool. All right, 1 second, let me get my notes. All right, so as was mentioned, I'm Nicole, and this talk is called How to Suck at Coding But Still Be a Great Developer. The alternate, less or more PG version is called How to Be a Great Developer while, actually, I forget what the alternate title is. So let's go with this one. How to Suck at Coding But Still Be a Great Developer. So this talk is not pointing fingers at anybody except for me, because I sort of wrote this talk for myself. For the purpose of this talk, we're going to talk a lot about me, but hopefully you can get something out of it anyway. Your mileage may vary. So I mentioned I'm Nicole Carpenter, and I'm here because I'm a great developer, which means more than just I have a job where I write code. Being a great developer is about more than coding, which I will demonstrate in this talk. So I mentioned this talk might not be for you. This is a talk that it's sort of wrote for this audience. I wrote this for Nicole 6 years ago when I was going through my own coding boot camp. And it's kind of what I wanted to hear when I was learning how to code. I know that everybody comes into this process, with different levels of aptitude, different levels of ability or competence even is a big part of it too. And, there might be a lot of people in this audience who are super smart, really confident, like just very well-adjusted senior developer, or not senior developers, but well-adjusted like developers coming in who are gonna be able to jump in and, take the reins and make an awesome, beautiful junior developer. But some of you may not be in that position or may not feel confident that you're going to be in that position. So this talk is for those people. But even if you're not one of those people, hopefully you could still get something out of it. I don't think that this perspective is widely represented, because I think a lot of the people that give talks are people who are, those confident, very, very highly skilled people who are kind of showing off all of their brilliance, but this is not that kind of talk. So please stick with me, even if it's not for you. So a little background to show you why I think I am qualified to give this talk. I started to learn how to code in college, and I didn't love it. I went to VCU, which is Virginia Commonwealth University. I got my bachelor's degree there. And when I was learning how to code, I really came in with like very minimal coding experience. Actually, I would say zero coding experience. I knew how to use Excel minimally. And I think some people probably have that same background when they first start to code. I was working and kind of trying to automate some things in Excel, and I was like, this is coding, right? Not so much. It's a good little intro, but when I would ask questions during class, a lot of the people that were in college for coding had been doing it for years, or really had some sort of base knowledge that I didn't have. So I always struggled with asking questions, because the attitude that I would get when I would ask questions was kind of off-putting. I would ask a question and basically get this attitude of like, you don't know how to do this incredibly easy thing, which kind of deterred me from asking questions. Now, granted, this was, 10 years ago, and a lot of things have changed, hopefully. As in a professional, setting like this, it's a little bit more friendly to junior developers, and hopefully college has changed as well. But that kind of attitude felt like Stack Overflow, a while ago. And I think Stack Overflow is making a little bit of strides as well. Sometimes you go into Stack Overflow and you'll see the responses from people, and they're really, really icky. But yeah, that's how college felt for me. So I was like, after college, I was like, nah, maybe I don't want to be a coder. I was in business school. It was like an IS major. So I was like, hey, maybe I don't need to be a coder. But then when I Googled how, what kind of jobs I could get as a IS information systems major, a lot of the responses were, you should be a junior developer. So I sort of leaned into that because I wanted to have a job. So I went to a coding boot camp. I went to Dev Boot Camp, which actually is the home base of where Rod actually started learning to code. Dev Boot Camp is the basis the foundation of what the curriculum at Code Platoon is built off of. And I went to Dev Bootcamp before Code Platoon was a thing, before Alpha Platoon. So I would have loved to save $12,000, but it wasn't a thing at that point. So even when I was at my coding boot camp, it was a very low point for my confidence, because we had, the way that the curriculum is set up, we had a 9-week course. So it was 3 sections. And then the 9-week course ended up taking me 15 weeks because I repeated the first 2 sections. So, which was kind of a cool feature, like, you know, hey, you didn't get this first 3, let's try to repeat it and see if you can get it the second time around. And I did both second times around, but it was still kind of rough for me. One of the things that I would constantly hear other students say is, hey, you're going to have these aha moments. Like, wait, it's going to come and you're going to be like, aha. And a lot of people around me were like, wait till you get your aha moment. And I never got my aha moment. Even as a professional developer, I still don't get aha moments. I don't know if that's just how my brain works or what. I mean, once in a while, I'll be like, I get it, it clicked. But for the most part, nothing was clicking. Like, it took me like a very, very slow on-ramp to learn some things. I actually heard some really good, but kind of hard to hear advice from an alumni who came in to mentor. And he basically said that the discomfort that I was feeling learning in this coding bootcamp environment very, very likely could follow me into my professional career. So it wasn't like, you know, hey, this environment, you know, is very special, which it is, you know, like you're working at a weird pace that isn't kind of common for, you know, being a professional developer. But at the same time, like the struggles that I was feeling, you know, just the fundamentals of learning, he was basically trying to prepare me that, you know, not discourage me, but say, hey, things aren't going to come easy to you, like you are observing is happening for other people. So that was actually really good advice for me. Again, it wasn't meant to discourage me, but it was basically meant to say, hey, things aren't going to come easy. You're going to have to adapt and you're going to have to work hard. So once you like accept the fact that things aren't going to come easy, it's going to be a little bit better for you, because you're going to be able to change your mindset essentially and kind of not feel sorry for yourself. So I actually successfully got a job after my coding bootcamp, which was amazing for me. I didn't have the confidence, but I went into my interview pretending I did. So, which I thought helped a lot. I got this apprenticeship. Actually, I think a lot of the reason why I got this apprenticeship was because of the things that I'm going to talk about in this talk that made me a great developer, made me a great teammate, that weren't necessarily the coding aspects. So I started at 8th Light. Many of you, I mentioned, are being mentored. And so hopefully you'll start talking to your 8th Light people. We've hired, I think, 6 developers from Code Platoon, and we have like a really small company. So that's really awesome. We have a really good alumni set at 8th Light. So if even if 8th Light isn't hosting this particular cohort as a sponsor, look into it, because we have this awesome program, this apprenticeship, which will hire junior developers into the apprenticeship. It's usually like 6 to 8 months, and it's essentially on the job training. It's like a great on-ramp where for me, I wasn't ready to be a junior developer, and I started this program, and you work with 2 or 3 mentors who are giving you projects in different languages and just different paradigms, and giving you the opportunity to kind of gradually learn the way that 8th Light wants you to be able to work. So for me, that was a really cool transition to go from the coding bootcamp to the apprenticeship. And then once I finished the apprenticeship, I became a junior developer. So I already mentioned how I was very, very unconfident, and maybe you're thinking, you just have imposter syndrome. And I'm not sure whether or not at this point you've been exposed to imposter syndrome, but here's a definition just in case you haven't. A psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments, and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. So one thing to note here, when an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments. So when I was a junior developer, I didn't feel like I had a lot of skills, talents, or accomplishments yet, especially when I was just starting on the job, because like I didn't have any accomplishments besides, you know, going through my coding bootcamp. Not trying to minimize that experience, because it definitely is something to brag about. But as a developer, I really didn't have much going for me. So now didn't want to accept that diagnosis. Not that I didn't want to accept that diagnosis. I didn't think it fit. Not saying that imposter syndrome isn't a real thing. It absolutely is a real thing. There are a lot of people, again, who have skills, talents, and accomplishments, high achieving people who absolutely do fit that bill. Now, there are also a lot of average or below achieving people who are essentially just trying to tread water while these high achieving people are swimming laps around them. So sometimes calling somebody an imposter or saying somebody has an imposter syndrome is a little bit dismissive or unhelpful, even though you might think that it's being helpful. Sometimes even there are other issues at play, such as sexism, classism, systemic racism, that could be contributing to the fact that this person is not achieving at a high level. But besides that, saying somebody has imposter syndrome shifts the problem to the individual. And sometimes people just need to acknowledge that the struggle is real for them. And once they acknowledge that, then they can know that it's something that can be addressed. So for the purpose of this talk and the beginning of this title, let's say that the struggle is real. Let's say that you suck at coding or you're not a great coder in the PC way. And let's figure out how we can get to where we need to be. So I like this quote. It's from Ratatouille. Hopefully you've seen the movie. It's awesome. But the quote is that anybody can cook. I like to use this as anybody can code. And I truly believe that anybody can learn to code given enough time, resources, and drive. Resources now are all over the place, internet. But time may be, rough. Drive is completely internal. So that's up to you. Okay, so how can I be less bad at coding? So that's kind of the question, right? It's not an overnight thing, which sucks. It's not something that you might get those aha moments. Yes, but like for me, it wasn't an overnight thing. I've been a developer for 6 years, and sometimes I still feel like I suck at coding, but I'm gainfully employed. My employer loves me. My client loves me. It's because I put in the work, right? So I already mentioned time and exposure is going to be what helps you learn. You're not expected to know everything when you leave your coding bootcamp. So, you're going to be going on to your internships or apprenticeships or even, starting as a junior developer. And when you're in that role, they're not expecting you to know everything or even being able to contribute 100% on day one. That's not reasonable. That's not even reasonable for a developer who's been developing for years. When I go into a new project, I have, a week or 2 weeks to kind of understand the system and figure out what the language is doing, what the frameworks are doing. So just keep that in mind. You're not going to be expected to start at 100. You're going to learn as you go. So that's important. But keep in mind that the job is coding, right? So how do we get better at coding? So I've been working with a lot of coding boot camps, and there's a few fundamental things that I've noticed with developers on day one. So the theme here is learning with time. These things require time to master, but recognizing the problems early help us learn to build our skills and get more experience. So first thing is learning to break down problems. So you've all run into this, I'm sure, by this point in your coding. So I haven't done it in a long time, admittedly, but I hosted a meetup called Chicago Ruby Hack Night. Maybe I'll do a version with y'all actually, because I haven't done it, but actually I'll set that up with y'all. So basically we'll take a small problem like tic-tac-toe or snake or something that like we know how to do in real life, and we'll take that problem and kind of break it down and work through the logical steps that a computer can execute. So with tic-tac-toe, you know how to write, the board, but does the computer know how to write the board? Does the computer know how to display the board? Do you know how to give it a input, an X, a space where you want to go? Does the computer know how to say, hey, that space is already taken, or that's not a valid space? So breaking down the problem that we know into logical steps that the computer can execute. And then this is something that I struggled with at first, but once you train your brain to think like that, then you get better with that over time. So another early problem is going to be writing maintainable code maintenance. You probably have gone through this. You maybe still are going through this, tripping over your own code. So there's this concept of writing clean code, you want to write clean code, maintainable code with expressive naming. So you know exactly when you look at a method, what that method is trying to do. So, you all write with Python and JavaScript. So you know that, indentations are important with Python and brackets are important with JavaScript. And, once you sort of get into the groove of writing with a specific language, you're going to get better at this. But, starting off, a lot of times this is an issue. So reading the error message. Almost every developer, every single day of their development career is going to run into errors. Errors are not to be feared. They're just trying to help. So you just want to read the error and figure out what it's trying to tell you, because it's just trying to help. All right. So let's talk about how we best learn. So there are different ways to embrace learning. And what's really cool about being a professional developer is that most of the time, even if some of these things you have to pay for, your company will pay for. I get I think $1,500 education budget, which I can use to buy books, I can use to go to conferences, I can use to, go through workshops. But most of the time, your company will support you learning because they want you to improve as a developer so that you're contributing more, essentially. It's business. So they're usually going to give you money to pay for you to get better. So on the Stack Overflow Develop First survey, I got the 2021 numbers, and it said that about 59.5 people learned through online resources. 51.5% of people learned through books or other physical media, and 10.2% of people who identified as professional developers learned through coding bootcamp. So there is hope for us. I learned through a coding bootcamp. A lot of people have learned through coding bootcamp. Actually, that number feels kind of low to me. I work with a lot of people at my company who did go through coding bootcamps, but I think it is also company dependent. There are a lot of companies that really embrace diversity of learning experience. And this is a diverse option of learning experience. There are some companies who are really kind of uptight about only hiring people with CS degrees. So you'll find them out there. But for the most part, as time goes on and more people are graduating from these coding boot camps, especially ones that have good reputations like Code Platoon, you'll see that companies will learn and understand how to embrace people from those. So, sorry, that's my citation. All right, so I'm going to talk about a couple of learning styles. So the first one is visual learning. So visual learners obviously learn with their eyes. This could include diagrams, cheat sheets, whiteboards. So whiteboarding, I think some of y'all are in person. Is much more effective when you actually have a physical whiteboard, but this could be like a virtual whiteboarding thing, like just, creating diagrams or mapping something out like UML. Videos are another way, and videos kind of cross a couple of different learning styles. So auditory obviously has to do with hearing. So this could be podcasts. 8th Light actually just started a podcast. I think we have like 8 episodes, which is cool. So everybody has a podcast these days, right? Videos, again, was across category. Meetups and lectures like Code Platoon sometimes. So verbal learning is anything to do with words in various forms. So this could be reading, writing, speaking. Technical books is one, and very, very abundant options out there. But also with technical books, sometimes you have to be careful because technology is changing constantly. So you want to make sure that you're getting the most recent options available, especially for things like JavaScript frameworks, which are constantly changing. All right. Blogs. So blogs could be reading or writing blogs. Either way, you're learning, hopefully. Zines. This is a new one I added because I just found a really cool zine about HTTP and how HTTP works by Julia Evans. I'd be happy to share that resource, but I wasn't even aware that that was an option. Also, if you're artistic, maybe you want to write a zine. That's pretty cool. Note-taking. Obvious. When I talked about the auditory learning of being in a lecture. For me, being in a lecture doesn't do anything unless I'm also taking notes. Prepping talks. And contributing to documentation or reading documentation. Both of those are effective. Or can be effective, I should say. Kinesthetic learning deals with touch and movement. So this could include tutorials like going through Code Academy or something like that. Writing projects, just jumping in. Hackathons, they're available. Some of y'all may have been to a hackathon before. They are basically when a bunch of people come together. Usually it's like an overnight thing, like a 24-hour or 48-hour thing where you're just trying to contribute to a goal. So maybe the goal is building a really basic app or a feature for something. And usually it's for nonprofits. So there's an element of good to there. Contributing to open source, there's a lot of blogs out there about how to do this, so Google that. Katas and koans are something that I learned about at A-Flight. They're basically, so katas are, you can find these on YouTube actually, it's really interesting. A lot of times they're like played to techno music, which is super weird, but kind of fun. So basically it's taking a really, really basic challenge. So like Roman numerals or coin changer or something like that. And the idea behind doing the kata is that you are learning kind of the muscle movement of TDD. TDD is test-driven development, meaning you're writing your tests before you're writing your code, and then you're writing the code to make the test pass. So that's interesting. If you want to learn more about that, YouTube is the place to go. And then koans are, I find koans interesting, like an interesting way to learn a new language, because it's kind of like Code School and Code Academy, where they'll start at like 0, like for the language, like how do you add 2 numbers, or, how do you write a string or something? And it'll just incrementally increase the difficulty from there. Okay, social learning is a little bit hard to do virtually. So hopefully, if you are a social learner, you're learning to adapt in these times. But meetups are a good way to socially learn. Hackathons, study groups. Study groups are awesome. I wish I would have taken more advantage of study groups when I was learning. And you can even form your own study group. So that's always an option. Mentoring. I love mentoring. I'll talk about this more later. Mob and pair programming. So mob programming, y'all know pair programming, but mob programming is basically when everybody is the navigator and there's one driver, and basically just telling the driver what to do. And then one-on-one learning. And I included this because one of the things that I saw in the Stack Overflow development survey is that I think it was like 18.3% of people learned to code from a family member, they specifically said, or a friend, which I thought was a really fun way to include social learning. Okay, so talk about me again. So I don't learn in specific ways, and these are things that I've had to kind of learn over time. Like first couple of years of me being in my development career, I bought a ton of books, and it was a waste of money for me because I just don't learn like that. Technical reading is not my thing. Words just don't stick to my brain when they enter my eye holes and my ear holes. And then lectures, same deal. Hackathons and pair programming for me, specifically, this is kind of like a very, very individual thing for me, but like I get really, really nervous when I have to work next to somebody or, pairing or something, and I start sweating, and I start thinking about why I'm thinking about my sweat instead of like the problem, and it's just really anxious. I get really anxious. So I don't love to learn via hackathons or pair programming. That being said, I will say that there is definitely a benefit to pair programming. So I will push myself to do it. And it usually takes a little bit for me to get into it before I start, seeing the benefit and being able to contribute and feeling more confident to do it. So don't knock it off, but definitely something that I don't love doing. Maybe we can just take a quick break, and if anybody knows like what like any additional ways to learn that you've discovered, maybe you can drop it into the chat. I'd love to see like other people's ideas of like maybe some resources that they've used to learn that I didn't list, because I'm always trying to improve this. So if you can think of anything, just drop it into the chat, and I will keep going. Okay, so how I think I learned. So again, this is built over time. Tutorials are one way. I really enjoyed going through a tutorial on Bootstrap, which is a front end sort of it's not a framework, but it's something for creating beautiful websites. It's essentially just classes that you add to your HTML, and it allows you to use standardized styling to make elements work beautifully. So so blogging is another way that I think I learn well, but I hate blogging. Even though I hate blogging, sometimes I'll push myself to do it because I know that just the act of learning enough to teach will help me learn the subject. And then mentoring is great because it helps to build confidence. And even if I'm just going over really, really basic stuff, like the very, very week one Python stuff, I still feel like it's beneficial to me because of the confidence that I'm building while I'm mentoring. And then documentation is something that I love. Documentation is, again, reading or writing documentation. So if you're going through a project for the first time and there's no README, that's a great way to learn, because you're going through the steps that you needed to do in order to start the program, and you're contributing by writing it down for the next person that's going to have to do it. So again, let me look at some of these responses and see what we have as far as what people like to learn. I know this is from earlier. Lyman likes flowcharts, which is awesome. Flowcharts are great. Yes, I will add that. Udemy and YouTube is awesome as well. Udemy, you always see these sales on Udemy. So I don't know if things are perpetually on sale, but there's a lot of good deals on there. Visualization. Oh yeah, a lot of people love Udemy. Hopefully I'm saying that right. That's how I've always pronounced it. Long courses online, done at your own pace, like the Odin project. It's a great one. Free code camp. Yep. I have stock in Udemy because I use it so much. Perfect. Lectures, oral info stick a lot better for me personally. See, we're opposite. I have an apprentice right now at my job, and she loves technical reading. Like, that's her thing. That's like, we've tried different things with her. Like, we've tried blogging and giving talks and reading, and because of in our process, we have this 6 to 8 month process where we can actually like give her a lot of different learning styles, so that way we can figure out what works best for her. And yeah, technical reading is what stuck, so that's awesome. And then taking handwriting notes versus typing them, that's another good thing to try as well. Started somewhat while doing MTurk. What's MTurk? You make nothing without scripts and learning from going off of what others were doing. All right, I'll wait till you tell me more about that. App Academy Open is pretty fire. That's what I was doing prior to Code Platoon. Udemy has been exceedingly helpful. Yes, a lot of pluses for Udemy. Best thing for me is to come up with my own projects. Marketing tricks. I'm a ready, fire, aim kind of guy. So getting in and failing forward is usually my preferred method. Yeah, that's the kinesthetic learning in you. Good job, Brian. Figured it out. I was in digital marketing for 10 years. All right, crowdsourcing. Oh, that's from the MTurk. Gotcha. And then coding challenges on exorcism. That's a good one as well. Reddit. I am a constant Redditor. There's a subreddit called Learn Programming, which I'll hang out in occasionally. I hang out in the Ruby subreddit, but the Learn Programming one is usually pretty good. It's actually kind of cool too. Like when you're learning, and I mentioned mentoring on this slide, a lot of people are like really on level 0, like very, very basic. So it's a good way to build confidence for you to see like what other people are learning and maybe even contribute and give some advice. It's a little bit harder on Stack Overflow, I think, to kind of get into it, but Reddit is an open forum. So that's a really cool place to start. Learn Programming subreddit. All right, cool. I'll move on. That was fun. Ankur, can you save that for me? All right. So Another great way to learn programming is to expose your ignorance. So this is a term that I heard for the first time when I went through my coding bootcamp, dev bootcamp. And it basically just means ask questions, like don't struggle in silence. We've all been where you are. And, it's easy to think that what you're asking, you should have known. And I do this constantly. But I mean, maybe other people have the same question. Actually, most likely in a class of 40 people or however many y'all have, somebody else is going to have the same question. So don't feel like your questions are dumb, spread it out. One method that I've used a lot in my career when I don't have the confidence, and a lot of this talk is about confidence really, but I've learned to build allies at my company. So like when I was working on something with JavaScript, I really rarely write JavaScript. So I really feel anxiety when I have to do it. But I know that there are a lot of people who just love writing JavaScript, have a ton of experience in JavaScript, and that's their thing. So I know, when I have a question in JavaScript, I'll just go to Josh, or when I have a question in Ruby, I'll go to Mike. I have these allies that I feel safe going to and asking questions. And I try to spread it out. I try not to put, all this pressure on this one person to solve my problems. But, building allies has been a really good strategy for me. You have your mentors, you have your TAs, you have teachers, you have classmates, find some people that are just super excited about something that you just have no idea about. And, ask them if it's okay, if you can ask them questions once in a while. And that's a good strategy for me. Hopefully it works for you. Okay. So now we're to the point where we talked a lot about coding and how to improve your coding abilities over time, but we're going to assume that you're still a junior developer, time hasn't elapsed, and you just aren't there yet as a coder, which is fine. Again, I mentioned that day 1, day 20, day 100, you're still not going to be expected to know everything. So you can still be a great developer, which is the point of this talk. So again, I'm going to be talking about myself a lot here, but maybe you can relate. So one of the strategies that I've used a lot, and this is definitely not for everybody, is to not say no to things. So people ask me a lot to do things that take up my time, and I have said yes a lot. I actually started doing this in the Marine Corps, and I know that this is absolutely not something you're supposed to do in the Marines or in any branch of service, I'm assuming, volunteering for things. But I used to do the Joint Service Color Guard when I was at DLI, and it was a time commitment, and it took a lot of my free time, but I got exposed to things that I never would have been able to do. I released a dove at Clint Eastwood's house. That's cool. I went to Sharks games. I went to, NFL games. And it was just something that I knew that I was sacrificing my time, but I was getting something out of it as well. Experience, things that poor person from, Bumblefuck, Pennsylvania would have never been able to do on my own. So I kind of brought that into my attitude with coding. I host meetups. I volunteer at Code Platoon. I ran an internal conference at 8th Light. And all of these things are things that definitely take time, definitely take energy. And, it exposes you to new people, new ideas, new concepts. And again, there is a cost to it, which is time, but you have to see if the benefit that you're going to be getting out of it is worth it for you. And that's a completely personal decision. Okay, so sometimes I like to consider contributing in order to be a great developer. And, obviously I don't feel confident in my coding, so I personally want to be able to contribute in other ways. So one great way to do this while you're also learning to be a better coder is to double dip your learning styles. So, so learning and then teaching. So I mentioned earlier, when I'm preparing to give a talk or preparing to give a blog, there's a bunch of research that's involved, because I don't want to come off as not knowing what I'm talking about when I'm presenting something. So you're researching, you're learning, you're taking notes, you're getting the materials down, but then you're going to also share what you learn in a blog or presentation or a zine I mentioned, or a podcast or something. Everybody's got a podcast these days, so definitely just throw one up there. But my company has an official 8th Light blog where I've contributed couple. But even if it's just something small to like, coding boot camp or like a meetup or something that's a little bit low pressure. There's always low pressure things that you could find. Facilitate learning is another way. So hosting tech events. I mentioned that I host meetups, but I also host an annual conference that we do internally at 8th Light. And it was really fun. Like, it's such a really fun way to, like, I didn't actually have to give a talk. I did this year actually, but like, I don't have to. Like, it's just a way to facilitate other people learning. And there's a lot of benefit for everybody in that situation. Adding documentation. I've talked about documentation a bajillion times, but adding to the wiki, adding to your README, I think is like just such an awesome way to contribute and help the next person that's going to be joining the team. And then, mentoring. So taking on an apprentice at 8th Light is a thing. There's always this, like, I mean, generally your apprentice is going to know a lot less than you. Mentoring at Code Platoon is kind of the same deal. I've been a developer for 6 years, so hopefully I know more than the person that I'm going to be mentoring. Shout out to Kat. But also, like, even if you're in a coding boot camp, like I was going through my apprenticeship the first time I tried to TA at Code Platoon, and there's always going to be people that know less than you. They're like, at my job, we do this thing with the Noble Network, which is this network of high schools in Chicago. And they're high school students, so they're just these days high school students probably know a lot more about coding than 5-10 years ago. But even if you're teaching your nephew how to code, there's always somebody that you could mentor who knows less than you. So that's a fun lesson. All right, let me check this chat real quick. All right, so +1 for Bumblefuck. All right, the Marine Corps, there's no volunteering, there's only voluntold. I don't know, I volunteered. Let's see, volunteer for everything keeps you out of crappy details. That's true. Cool. All right, let's see. So this is kind of the crux of this talk, or I think one of the most important parts. And there's only one slide. So let me start off by asking real quick, if you can drop into the chat, what attributes do you feel best reflect a high functioning team? So we'll start there. I'd just like to see your ideas on that. Communication. Trust. Good communication. Yep, that's important. Coachability, reliability, everybody getting along. I love that one. That's a beautiful. Accountability. Ability to take feedback, empathy, flow, unspoken communication, more positive than negative, positive attitude, being kind. Oh, I love these. Y'all are hitting almost everything that I'm about to talk about on this slide. Ownership, patience, being able to recognize weakness and strength rather than avoiding it. That's a good one. Willingness to learn, empathy, communication, sense of purpose, understanding what's behind what's and how, self-awareness and self-management. Cool. All right, I'm going to start on this slide. Y'all hit most of these, but let's go ahead and walk through them. All right, positive attitude. I saw this a couple of times. Some people memes. Positive attitude. So positive attitude basically just means like being the kind of person that you would want on your team. This is like my money maker. My team loves me. Every team I'm a part of loves me because I just come in with a positive attitude. I say good morning every morning, and I just always try to be the person that I would want my teammate to be. A lot of you say communication. Obviously, that's super, super important. There's a lot of different ways that you can communicate, though. So it's not just about like, the way that you talk to people. Giving feedback on a PR, that's communication. Being thorough and asking questions is another communication, another way that we communicate. And then documenting processes that are difficult. These are all methods of communication. Okay, this one's kind of weird, or not weird, but it's a little bit difficult to kind of explain or tell somebody to be intellectually curious because it's very internal. So it's like telling somebody to be passionate. So I think the way that you can build intellectual curiosity is to just increase your exposure to new things. So spend a little bit of time every day reading or writing code and just kind of build that, and you can still be a developer even if you're not passionate about being a developer. Like for some people, coding is a job, but being intellectually curious really will help you in your career because it gives you kind of a drive for doing the things that you go to work, for 8 hours a day doing. So just keep that in mind. You can still be a great developer even if this isn't a thing, but it helps a lot. All right, being responsible, obviously, cut and dry, just follow through, do the things that you say you're going to do. Empathy. I saw somebody or a couple people mention this. Empathy was not something that I considered important in life at all until I started at my coding bootcamp, and they mentioned it all the time. Like I knew the difference. I didn't know the difference between sympathy and empathy even as a 28-year-old. And I really got to know like how important being a good person is. That's kind of sad. Being a good person is, being a good teammate is, in my coding bootcamp. And I'm really glad that, we covered those sort of things. And it wasn't just about here, learn how to code this thing. But great developers are generally also great people, and great people care about other people on their team. So, I mean, there are great coders who really don't give a crap or are, tough to work with. And, it reflects the team. So, yeah, just try to be that kind of person. I mean, the good one, not the one I just mentioned. All right. And then finally, being open-minded. I did see this one as well. So y'all really hit this. Being open to new ideas and learning from the people around you. So thanks everybody for contributing. One last point I want to make is that you want to preserve your own sanity. You are on your own journey, and what helps you to be a great developer is going to be different from everybody else. It's completely individual. So for me, what makes me a great developer is not a one-size-fits-all approach. I spend a ton of time, doing things that aren't coding in my job. I maybe code like 20 hours a week, instead of like 40 hours or whatever. But I still feel like the things that I do help me to contribute to be a great developer. So explore what makes you a great developer, because it's up to you. And, this will be a process over time. You don't need to work a 60-hour week. I don't even work a 60-hour week. I maybe work 45 hours a week regularly. But it's completely up to you. Like maybe you have kids and maybe you just don't have time or don't have the energy, and that's completely fine. Just find what makes you a great developer, even if it's just like being on time for meetings or coming in with a smile on your face or whatever. Like just find what works for you. And that is my talk. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to field them. So let me stop sharing.
Hey, Nicole, I have a question. So I think you mentioned you went through a boot camp. How did you feel coming out of the boot camp? Did you feel ready? Did you think that you had learned nothing from boot camp? What were your thoughts, and like how did that kind of how did that kind of adapt or change over time?
Oh man, I did not feel ready. I felt really, really unconfident. When I was hired, I feel like I was hired based on the fact that I literally followed up with my company A-Flight every single week and like really pushed it. But once I started the coding part, it was really tough for me, and it was really hard for me to communicate how tough it was for me. I never considered myself like top of class at all. And it honestly, like just time and exposure to things, and like the more experience that I got, the more confidence that I built. And for me, there was no easy path towards that. It was just, the more I learned, the more confidence I got. And that's how it's been my entire career. Like I'm 6 years into my career now at 8th and I'm more confident now than I was in year 5. In year 5, I was more confident than year 4. And it was just for me, like there was no magic bullet. There was no no aha moments for me. It just like gradually learning and accepting the fact that that was okay. Accepting the fact that I didn't need to jump tiers. I could just slowly and gradually learn and still be a valuable teammate, still be a valuable member of A-Flight, because of the other things that I could contribute. So.
you talked a lot about like the common attributes to the personalities that you've witnessed throughout your experience, throughout your career. What was like the most uncommon characteristic of a person that you didn't expect to actually help them excel? Like, for example, like I'm probably just describing myself, but like someone who's a little more funny that surprisingly will bring warmth to a team, and it made a team that didn't have a person that was funny or more positive. Like it built that team up more than a person that wasn't as funny. I don't know if that makes sense.
So interestingly, the person that I think has contributed the most to my professional development isn't funny at all. He's like very, very dry, but he gives the best pull request feedback. Pull request, merge request, pull request, GitHub, pull request. He gives the best feedback, right? So his just communication style, and even though I would never like sit down and have coffee with him or like anything like that, just the fact that he is so thorough with the feedback that he gives, in not just with code, but like pushing me to be a better communicator as well. I don't know if this is actually answering your question, but like that I think has been like one of the really big contributing factors for me to learn and grow as a developer. Was that your question, or did it just answer something completely?
Yeah, that kind of answered my question. Like what it's like, he gives great pull requests, and seeing something that's done so well helps you learn, like, okay, that's how you do it the right way. Like I can kind of pick at it. Kind of, yeah.
It's not his pull request, it's him reviewing my pull requests that I found like really valuable, because like it's not just like, okay, yeah, he wrote the code, it works, you know, or she wrote the code, it works. He's like, you know, why did you make this decision, or why, you know, I see that you're duplicating this code, or like he's like so thorough with the things that he is giving me in feedback that it's making me be a better developer. And that's why I mentioned like pull request feedback is communication 100%. And when you are able to communicate in that way, it's not just positive for you, but it's positive for your whole team. And actually communication in general, like everybody that when I asked that question mentioned communication, and it's so important.
I have a question for you. What's your favorite thing about being a developer? And like, I guess technical side and non-technical side.
I do it for the money and the glory. No, money helps, actually. Money's really great. So before, I'm not even lying, like before I was a developer, I like the most I ever made in a job was $15 an hour, which is nothing, right? As you know, I was in my late 20s and barely scraping by. Not saying like everybody should do it for the money, but it's been really nice. Like I'm buying a condo now, like I feel like financially secure, I can help my family. Like that's a huge thing. And I'm not trying to be like humble about it. Like it's like changed my life. Like I've had two friends that have come through Code Platoon that you know, both of them, one is working at Motorola, one is working at DRW, and they have like amazing careers, and both of them were like really struggling beforehand. It's like such a life changer, right? So money is great. What was the other part? Sorry, I just kept thinking about money.
So I asked like your technical side, like what's your favorite thing as far as that goes, and then non-technical.
Okay, so technical, I work in Ruby, right? So I'm basically a back-end developer. We don't have a lot of like front-end elements, but whenever I get a chance to like make something work in a really fun, like JavaScripty way, those are always the times where I'm like, I'll work till, you know, 7, 8, 9 at night, because I'm like trying to solve this problem that will make the user experience like a lot better. And we don't have designers on our team. We don't have like UX people on our team, but being able to kind of step into that role where I can make something, like my team members are really the like, let's just make it work, they could figure it out, kind of like old men developer types. And me actually caring about what the user experience is kind of what gets me going on the technical side. So that I find that fun.
Yeah, so going off, oh, go ahead. Okay, I guess I'll go. Going over like kind of with Courtney's question, I like to have like the pros and cons of things. So what's something you kind of dislike about being a software developer?
Oh man. That's a hard question to answer. What do I dislike? Sometimes I will have to work with people that have really, really old school ways of thinking about things, and it's a little bit tough to deal with that. Like I mentioned, sometimes I butt heads with people who don't want to spend the time to make something work the way that makes sense. They just want to make it work in a way that saves money, and not spend the extra time. And those conversations are a little bit difficult for me because I really have to kind of fight for my position and fight for the user's position. And then let's see what else. Yeah, I mean, sometimes like I have no energy by the end of the week. Like sometimes like my work is draining and like my weekends are fully like recovery mode. And that's just because like, you're getting paid a lot of money to do important work sometimes. And, sometimes it really like you have to make sure that you find that balance. And sometimes it's hard to, sometimes like you're really up against a deadline and you feel that pressure to, push yourself, and it's zapping, it's draining. That's not all the time though. I mean, some companies, some jobs are going to be like way, way more high pressure. For me, it's like very rarely, like couple once a quarter or something, I'll like really have to like at the end of the week, like look back and be like, gosh, I really need to sleep for like 20 hours. But yeah, that comes and goes. And then what was your other part? Like what's my favorite part?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Because I have a lot of favorites.
Is there like if you can give one like specific quote or like piece of advice given to you, what would you say? What would be like the one that stuck with you throughout your entire career?
Oh, I mentioned it during my talk. The fact that things are not going to come easy for me. That was really, really important for me to be able to embrace and understand. And because I was just feeling sorry for myself. Like I was feeling sorry for myself and saying, oh, I'm never going to get this. Everybody's going to be so much better. Like I was just in that mode for like weeks, during my coding boot camp. I was just feeling sorry for myself and wondering if this was for me. And I mentioned like everybody can learn to code. Sometimes it takes more time, but like once you like learn to change that attitude in your head, then I think that really goes far in helping you, like that attitude change is really important. Was for me at least. Kat.
Hey, Nicole. I wanted to ask you, I know you said that you kind of took on some roles, some leadership roles and things like that. Was that something that kind of came naturally to your personality, or was it like you had to kind of push yourself to do those things because you knew that they would benefit you?
So anything that involved public speaking, I had to push myself for because I am not a natural public speaker. Like this talk took me 5 years to write. Not 5 years to write. It was just something that I've been thinking about for 5 years, but like I gave it for the first time 1 year ago in an internal conference that I hosted. And it's not something that I wanted to do or was looking forward to do, but now like Ankur has invited me back every cohort, to give this talk, and it's a lot more natural for me now. But like initially public speaking, even like in the meetups that I host, just doing the introduction is like really anxiety inducing for me, but that's something I push myself towards. But other things like anything that involves organizing, I love doing, and that comes really natural to me. So like the conference that I organized, I'm ridiculous in my Slack about like promoting, the conference that was coming up, and everybody knows my name at my company because I feel really comfortable like asking people to do things. So that's always helpful too. But yeah, so it's a mixture of things that I wasn't good at and leaned into, and things that I was good at and leaned into. So just a lot of leaning. Porfirio. Did I say that right?
Thank you. Yeah, it was pretty close.
Cool. Good enough.
I was wondering, what's your day-to-day look like at this point, 6 years in?
Sure. So I have an apprentice right now at my company. So I usually spend like 30 minutes to an hour with her every day. And that's kind of, so on my, I'm in a consultancy. So my consultancy has me working with a client that incidentally I've been with for 5 years, which is very, very rare, right? Most of the time when you're in a consultancy, you're jumping from project to project every, few months. But I've been working with a client for 5 years, and my first meeting of the day is at 11:45 because they are based on the Pacific Coast. And then we'll usually have meetings between 11:45 and like 2 o'clock, generally during the day. I spend probably, I would say 5 to 6 hours coding a day, which well, not anymore because I have my apprentice and I manage people, and I was doing that conference. Yeah, I would say I spend, on good days, I spend, 6-7 hours a day coding. And then on some days I only spend like, 1 to 2 hours coding because we'll have meetings, we'll have presentations, we'll have, other stuff going on. But yeah, I would say I spend most of my week coding. But a lot of people are going to be way higher on that percentage than me because I take on so much other stuff. But my company also supports the fact that I am not coding so much because they find value in the other things that I'm doing as well. Recently, like I said, I had that conference last week, and I was spending like 2 hours a day working on stuff like that, like promotional materials and getting people excited about it and getting people to participate, which again is not the typical job of a coder. It's not the typical job of a developer, but that's something that I've found that I enjoy doing. And my company supports the fact that I'm not billing my client. I think that my client gets billed like $190 an hour for me to code. So the fact that they could like let me spend, half of my week not billing $190 an hour really kind of speaks to the value that you can provide on your company if coding is not like the only thing that you want to do.
Okay, do we have any last questions for Nicole? We definitely want to be respectful of our time, so we're hitting that hour mark. But Surichi, I think you have a question, so we'll have you be the final question for this morning.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Nicole, for this meaningful talk. My question is, how did you end up getting your first coding job? I mean, what really helped, I guess? And then the second one is, how did you communicate, that I don't know in your first coding job, I guess?
Okay, so I'll start before my first coding job. I tried to hide the fact that I didn't know a lot. And I learned very quickly that that doesn't work because I was just getting left behind. And I mentioned that I had to repeat some things. And then I learned to expose my ignorance. I had the benefit of being in an apprenticeship where I had somebody with me. I had mentors where we had that kind of intimate professional relationship where they were the people that if I didn't know, they were the ones that I would go to. So I think it's kind of important if you start with a company where you don't have a mentor or you don't like officially have a mentor, like trying to find somebody that can sort of fill that role. And maybe they can't spend, 6 hours a week or 5 hours a week like my mentors did with me, but just somebody where you feel comfortable saying that you don't know or that you need help, I think is really important. And I'm sorry, what was your first question?
How did you, what really worked to get your first coding job?
Oh man, I was just like annoying. I was like, I had several interviews, but 8th Light was a place that I wanted to work because of the apprenticeship. And I just followed up a lot. Like it's a really long process. And I sent a lot of emails, not like annoying. Like I sent like one a week if I wasn't hearing from them and just be like, hey, just wanted to follow up and see how it's going. And hey, I submitted my coding challenge. I just wanted to see if there's anything I needed to do. So I was just persistent. And I think it was a good, like I got hired in 2016. And I think that was just like a good time to get hired too. Just because that was like, coding boot camps were like a thing for like 2-3 years at that point. So people had a little bit of a knowledge with it, but yeah, I was good about deadlines. I was good about communication. And again, coming out of a coding boot camp, you're not expected to be like a baller coder. So being able to demonstrate that you can communicate and that you know, are responsible with deadlines and stuff like that, I think, you know, speaks a lot.
Sorry, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right there. Nicole, as always, thanks so much for coming in. I really enjoyed the presentation. I think our students get a lot out of it to hear your experience, your advice, and your insight here. So yeah, again, hopefully we'll have you back for the next cohort also. But all the best to you and for 2020, 2022 ahead, I guess.
Thanks. And if anybody wants to, please feel free to reach out to me on Slack. I'm in your Quebec Platoon Slack. And yeah, hope to talk to you, talk to some of y'all later.
Nicole, last question for you. Do you have any travel destinations for this this year?
No, but I'm buying a condo and I'm moving in 3 weeks. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm trying to save money. So no plans.
Gotcha. All right. We'll check in on your new condo next time we chat. But yeah, thanks so much, Nicole.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, so that was Nicole Carpenter. Hopefully you guys enjoyed her talk as much as I always do. But yeah, again, some of the things I want to highlight, like expose your ignorance. I'm key on that. Again, it's not about knowing everything. It's about being able to find the answers, how to problem solve. Again, having the answers doesn't have much merit, but having the ability to, you know, problem solve, get to your answer, and figure things out when things get tough. That is a better, you know, a better trait that I would want to see in any coworker or employee, rather than just like, hey, yeah, I know everything, so I'm the best employee ever. Okay, so with that, it is 10:02. Let's take a break, and then we're gonna continue with some more OOP practice after break. So let's take a I don't know, 8-minute break, 10-minute break. Let's be back at 10:12. So 10-minute break, and then we'll get started with some lecture. All right, see you guys in a bit.